Oh, the sun is high in the sky, and the trees are sweetly blooming, and the wild mountain tide goes around the blooming heather. Well, you go, lassie, go, and we'll all go together to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? If my true love she would die, I would surely find another to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? Will you go, lassie, go? Will you go, oh lassie, go?
Right, we're actually going to start more or less on time, actually. So I might just give the people outside there a minute to come in. So I suppose just some housekeeping first, anyway. The exits are clearly marked at the back here on the left-hand side here. The toilets are just through this door here, to board them to the left. And after the two central doors there is where the teas and coffees will be after. I think that's it. So thanks for coming on a good, well, winter's evening, which it certainly is out there. I just going to introduce you, I suppose, to Anne Gardner. And Anne's father, Johnny Carney, or John J. Carney, was captain of the Skeheenarinky company. And as you'll see from the slides there on, very, very active. So I'd like to welcome Anne to just give the introduction.
Good evening, everybody. My father was John Carney from Coolgarden Row, and my brother John, my two sisters Kathleen and Eileen, and I grew up listening to him telling stories about his activities during the War of Independence in the early 1920s. So we got to hear him over the years, but he really went to town on it on the days of the trashing or saving the hay, when all the mehel would be in helping to do the job. And some of them had seen a bit of action themselves, I think. So it would be after the dinner, and we'd be all sitting around the big table, and he would start off talking about his time as commander of the Skeheenarinky company, when they did their manoeuvres, tearing up roads and burning down, knocking down bridges, etc. But sometimes the job in hand would be almost forgotten. So we used to be listening away to this, and as children we were more intrigued by the hunger strikes that we heard about. We liked food, and we were imagining our poor father and his comrades having nothing to eat for days on end. So that was how it went. And I think we're all very indebted to Neil Donovan here for all the work and research he's put into this tonight, all the time he spent researching and recording and getting all his facts and data together about the people and the events of the time. And I think it's fitting too that we should pay tribute and honour the people, the men and women of the time and the locality who did their bit during the War of Independence here in this hall tonight in Ballyporeen. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anne. And that's exactly what Anne is saying, that we'll go through all the period from 1914 really right to 1921, to the truce tonight. So the format is, the first part is, it's very visual, slides what you see here, I'll just talk through what you see. And it's going from the 1914 up to 1921. That's the first part, through visuals. The second part then really is the townlands, as we call it, which is all the people, the men and women, the near 100 in Skeheenarinky company that took part. And we've as pictures of the majority of as it happens. And to wind up then, we have some local, well, actually everyone on the stage tonight will be related to someone involved in this. And we have singers lined up here and musicians to finish up with a few songs at the end. So I'll start the slideshow here and take you through it. There's a lot of slides. I suppose, first of all, there's a lot of information. As always, when you start this, it grows and grows. But the one good thing is see Seamus Ince here recording it. So it will be up in YouTube in a couple of weeks' time, the full thing. And so there's a lot of detail in here. So if you want to see detail, it'll be online anyway in a couple of weeks. So I'll start up on the story. And this time I'm going to use my little red pen. I got criticised last time, so we're moving on, we're advancing. So it's Skeheenarinky Company, 6th Batallion Cahir, Tipperary 3rd Brigade, of the South really, 2nd Southern Division. And we'll be looking at Irish volunteers coming on the Irish Republican Army. So initially I'll just give you a very, very brief where this sits in. The companies Skeheenarinky is a company. I know you see here down A, B, C, down long. And this map probably clears it better. These are all, and this would have been organised by primarily, sorry to go back there, maybe it's been, I suppose Sean Tracy and Ed McGrath and Cahir. So Skeheen is that's where we are interested here, this area. Burncourt beside it and Ballyporeen below it. And they come under the 2nd Southern Division, the 3rd Tipperary Brigade. So it's the company, the battalion, Cahir, the Brigade, the 3rd Tipperary, and the division, the Southern. So it started in that order as they got organised. And so we're in the 3rd Tipperary, which you hear quite often. And the start of it, Irish Volunteers started in 1913, primarily as a result of the Ulster Volunteers. Politics was, John Redmond was making inroads in Home Rule, and the Ulster, they were getting edgy about it. They felt the day is coming. So they got themselves organised and armed. And likewise, in Ireland, that's what the Irish Volunteers started up in reaction to that. Now, politics still was taking hold. So you see here, start up in Rotunda in 1913. In Kilbenny, then, they start up in May 1914, which is quite soon enough. And that included Skeheenarinky personnel. So you must remember, this is considered the Galtee Battalion at the time. So they started up quite early. And one of the earliest things here we have in June 1914, this is just looking up the street here. And luckily we have these photos thanks to the Derbies. This is Irish National Volunteers. And this is looking up Ballypreen Street here. So they marched out from, this is Mitchelstown Brass and Reel Band coming down the street. And the same day, there was 1,000 in the street here doing drilling. Now, what's drilling? Drilling, they had no guns. They had just hurleys, sticks, and you'll see that. But here, the Galtee Regiment, you can see the 200 came from Mitchelstown, but Skeheenarinky is here and the neighbouring areas. So bear in mind, there was 1,000 people up and down the street here doing drills, and that went on for most of the day. Again, we see this picture the same further on down. The one thing to remark about this picture, this person here is actually Liam Lynch, who was an ordinary volunteer at the time and became quite prominent. And obviously this year is the 100th year anniversary of his. But he was just a simple volunteer at that stage. And here, this is looking right across. And again, this person in front is one of these people is a Skeheenarinky commander. But as you can see, they had no rifles, they had no anything. They just had their well-dressed Sunday clothes, really. And this is, I suppose, O'Brien's at the time, Keneally's now the corner shop, and up along. And this is Farrell's. And this is of note because you'll see it's a single story, not, well, I suppose two-story, but and that's you'll see later on what happened to Farrell's. But here you can see Farrell's over the door. So again, the Skeheenarinky would have their, whatever, 50, 60 maybe people that came down and marched. And here they marched in front of Father Keating, actually. He received them. So again, this is very much the whole community, and it's Redmond. It's very political. They're making a stand, but they don't have arms, and it's quite peaceful. They're not thinking military yet, really, in some respects. Again, a couple of weeks later in Mitchelstown, this time there's 2,000 people in the Galtee Regiment, and Skeheenarinky, 100 people come from Skeheenarinky. And again, they would have marched in along the road into Mitchelstown. More or less the same thing. And this is just showing, unity. This is the top of the square. You can clearly hasn't changed much. And the volunteers here again, lined up. Again, they're a bit more, they have bandoliers so they're getting a bit more of military, I suppose. And this is the National Volunteers. So again, the same day, just for context, Roger Casement was to take the salute on that day. Here's the telling why he couldn't come, and he sent Robert money, and in a couple of years' time, they will document what happened to these. So that's the scale of it. It was quite a big national organisation. Similarly, I suppose they started collecting money, and this is Defence of Ireland Fund, a collection in 1914 in September. And this is all the list of people, this is Skeheenarinky branch. And the Skeheenarinky, they contributed £35 in 1914 for this fund. And it's quite interesting, actually. You'll see it a bit further here. I just looked at the data in there, really. It's there's 180 people in it. There's 150 men, 30 women. There's 6 national school teachers, 2 district councillors, a parish priest. And the donations come in from New York, Queenstown, Darwin, Cork, Waterford and Melbourne. In all, there's 75 surnames. The most common is McGrath, with 11. Englishes and Welshes have 9 each. And there's probably another night in the hall here or somewhere. If you look at the top names, it's Mr. T. Whelan, Melbourne, Reverend M. McGrath, Darwin, Manchester, M. Quindon, Borrowee, John Jackson. So I'm sure they're filming to some people in the hall here. And these are the names that's on the list. I won't go through them all, but you'd see your own name there. They haven't changed. Some have disappeared. Some have moved on, and even a French up in Galtee Castle, actually, I think she was a teacher, I think. So it was a broad church, let's say, at this stage, the volunteers and the funds. And that was a fund for the volunteers, again, in anticipation. So again, we move on. Here again, this is all the Skeheenarinky are involved in all these in Castle Grace in 1914. Again, these just have hurleys at this stage. And the commander here is Patrick Cull from Skeheenarinky. He's representing Skeheenarinky and Castle Grace. Very similar. That went on. They met. Now, things changed in September 1914. The politics had been taken hold, but the First World War was taken, and John Redmond, I suppose, while he was making good inroads, and the inroads were celebrated all around this area with bonfires, don't get me wrong, every time the Home Rule advanced. But he took the gamble. He said, join the British Army and fight with your Ulster comrades. His vision was that they'd join up and that Home Rule would get done quicker. That was his vision. And in truth, around here, that took primarily was the way it was. And we can see here in Ballypreen, again, the Skeheenarinky, all entries. This is like a sports day, but organised by the volunteers. And this is after that. So we have the perception that they went military straight away. They didn't. They believed in home rule, and John Redmond still. And we have entries from Mitchelstown, Kilworth, Skeheenarinky, Ballyporeen, Cahir, Burncourt, Atfin and Ballybacon here. And they took part in all different games. And you know, but here you can see it on the other side then, as it moves on in October, their numbers are not as large as expected. So people are starting to drift away. But again, Kilbehenny, Skeheenarinky, 500. So in November 1914, there was 500 National Volunteer meeting up in Skeheenarinky at the crossroads. So it's still quite strong. And at that time, Mr. P. Casey takes command. And the newspapers, the Nationalist and the Cork Examiner, it says it's one of the most imposing and enthusiastic meetings ever held on the slopes of the Galties. So again, they're hanging on to the belief that, you know, politics will rule the day. But the split comes primarily because of that, the conscription. As I said, initially, as you can see here, National Volunteers, which is John Redmond, 175,000. The Irish Volunteers, 13,500, which is Owen McNeill. In effect, in putting it in simplistic terms, what you see here is what led to the Easter Rising. And this side, some went out to fought in the war. And primarily around this area, they would have been all on this side. But then, in effect, they all switched to the nationalistic side. And Skeheenarinky was no different than that. What did happen was, during conscription, and as we'll see further on here, the numbers of the volunteers swelled. But we will come to that. But 1916 happened, and there's two connections locally, I suppose, not in Cahir and here. Thomas Clark, which his mother, basically, as you see here, is his mother and father. His father was in the British Army, and they were married in Cahir. And there's a plaque that was put up there a number of years ago to commemorate that. So Thomas Clark has a very strong connection with Cahir. And likewise, Eamon Kent. His father was an RIC officer in Ballyporeen, and the RIC hall is this hall, actually. This was the RIC barracks. So Eamon Kent's father came from Larfun, just out the road here. And there's no house there, but the Haggard, and you can see the yard is still there, just as you go up Larfun to the right. And this is him here. And he was ended up in Galway, hence Eamon Kent was born in Galway. And the only kind of real, again, 1916 is Dublin, really. But Thomas Ryan Turbidit, who became quite prominent in the flying column after, he did get a message from Sean Tracy to go to Mitchelstown via Ballyporeen, and he was arrested here and brought into the barracks here and molested, I suppose, really. And after a while, Constable Vaughan vouched for him, and it's way to believe Constable Vaughan was interested in his sister or his aunt, I think, or something. That was some things never change. Moving on. So there's a bit of a gap then, I suppose. 1916 happens, and that everything is thrown up in the air. In some respects, the volunteer movement subsides to some degree, that meeting twice a week. So now, as I was saying, Skeheenarinky really is now gone. 1916, the executions, that's taken hold down around here. They're totally on that side. And we start to see the volunteers starting to reorganise again. The one difference is that conscription, you're either in or you're out this time. In conscription, the numbers swelled. They're very conscientious of that. And they're very, I suppose, suspicious, really, of people just trying to avoid it. So it became more hardcore, really. And they drilled. And you can see here they drilled initially at the caves. I suppose the volunteers started for Skeheenarinky and Ballyporeen were together, under Morgan Lyons, actually. But then the first volunteers, when this came, they were too large. So they joined they had two separate companies. But they still drilled at the caves in Mulcahy's. They drilled in Fogarty's field here. That's the corner as you drive down there from the cross. I think Michael's Jones Slattery just up here, literally, the field across there. They drilled in these fields. And McGrath's just at the back of the pub there as well. And there may be other locations, and if you know them, I'd certainly be more than love to. But this was quite in the open at this stage. You know, they weren't concealing this. Likewise, Sinn Féin forms in Skeheenarinky in October 1917. The president, as you can see here, is Thomas McGrath, I should say. The vice president, Thomas Jackson. Treasurer, Patrick Brady, more like the Brady. And the secretary, Dennis McGrath, from the pub as well. Dennis of Burncourt Castle later on. And again, these are the high-ranking Sinn Féin in South Tipperary. Every one of them are at the meeting. So again, that's the politics side is switching from Redmond to Sinn Féin. Locally, again, you can see here 1917 in those fields I'm saying in Skeheenarinky, they met twice a week, generally on a Wednesday and a Sunday, and drilled. Sinn Féin, as I said here, the Sinn Féin was established, and they're represented actually Skeheenarinky up in Bancha at a Sinn Féin executive meeting. That's Pat Brazil out the road. He was the nominated person from here, this area. But again, they had no arms. Unlike their comrades up in the north, the Ulster Volunteers were heavily armed. So they basically started making pikes, very similar to Wexford, I suppose, really. And these are ones in the local forges. These are made by the James Scully forge here. These are actual, the real deal. No doubt made in Duggins as well, Creeds or Brackbawn. And sometimes they'd makeshift ones up the mountain as well to make these. Now, strangely enough, they intend to put, you can see the holes, they intend to put handles on them. They never did. Why? Because they simply went around the local farms and gathered the shotguns. The vast majority would have been friendly, and they simply went up to the door and gave you advance notice, and there's the gun. Thanks very much. And they got all those shotguns. Why? Because the RIC didn't start to round up all the shotguns. They anticipated this, but they had got in Skeheen. They got them all before the RIC. Bar one, which Morris McGrath notes in up in Buncourt at a friendly loyalist house, and they had to bit more drastic. I said unsuccessful raid. The following morning, there was a warning poster put up outside the church, signed the Anti-Sinn Féin League. And Ned Mulcahy, Coolagarno, was walking over to the castle, and Morris McGrath went down and tore it down and confronted the loyalist. So again, they were making their statement. We're in charge here now. But they got 10 in Skeheenarinky. They got 10 single barrels and 2 double barrel shotguns. And again, at this time, inside 1918, Tom Fogarty here, you see outside Michael Cusack's in Mitchelstown, the hardware shop, and that was raided. And they got gel-ignite detonators, fuses and cartridges, and they never found anyone. So it was a pure inside job, to be honest with you. Tom Fogarty was working there, and he was a volunteer in Mitchelstown and in Skeheenarinky. So again, needless to say, the culprit was right under their noses, basically. So Sinn Féin rises in Skeheenarinky, and this is just a timeline here. And when you see here, the one in red is generally a national event, and this is leading to the election in 1918. And these are all various meetings down along, public meetings in Skeheenarinky. As I said, the Redmondites, that's more or less dying. They're still there, they're still campaigning, they're very much there actually, but the support around here in Skeheenarinky is going Sinn Féin. And here we see meetings at Buncourt, and Donovan who was involved in 1916 from Anglesborough, was quite prominent, and he's addressing the meeting. And again, you see contingents were present from Skeheenarinky and Buncourt, and a fife and drum band accompanied the former and discoursed some selections. So again, that's a bit interesting. We'd love to get to know who that fife and drum band was. I know Buncourt was quite detailed, but in Skeheenarinky as well. So the conscription then, as I said, this is massive meetings inside in Cahir, where they had big banners death before conscription. Count Plunkett comes down. Again, the similar faces. Dennis McGrath is the one representing Skeheenarinky. He's on the platform, sorry. There's quite a big crowd there from Skeheenarinky. And again, that gathered quite a bit of momentum. Likewise, in Claheen Board of Unions there, the same people, Dennis McGrath, Jay Shealy, representing Coolagarno ratepayers delegation. And that's just pure incident below. But again, you can see they're taking, the politics has taken hold, and they're infiltrating the politics, I suppose, really. And again, this is a meeting in Sinn Féin, no military or police present at Skeheenarinky at 3 o'clock when they're making talks. And again, this is the, I suppose, common post at the time, put them in to get them out. So elect them. They're all in jail, most of the leaders. This is McGuinness. In Tipperary, this is PJ Maloney. So again, more campaigning. Thomas McGrath, again, the same presided. Now, the one thing about the Sinn Féin personnel, they were generally a bit older, in that, when I say old now, they were probably about 30. As you'll see from the volunteers, they were very young. And again, in Skeheenarinky, here's the local band again playing. The local band attended and played Sinn Féin airs. So again, there's a bit of history. I don't think I've ever seen a picture of them actually, but there must be some info around the place. Again, strangely enough, this is the Limerick constituency come in to meet in Skeheenarinky. There were 700 people in Skeheenarinky, and this is Dr. Richard Hayes, who became quite prominent after, and London made a speech. So they obviously felt a bit threatened in Kilbenny, whatever, but they came into Skeheenarinky to have their meeting, quite a large one. So what all that meant was, as you can see from the green here, this is Sinn Féin in December 1918. They swept the boards, basically. And in Tipperary here, this is PJ Maloney. And and he was elected with 76% of the vote. So previous to that, the light green would have been the whole country, bar the, I suppose, the union seats in the north. So a complete changeover, and that's what gave them the mandate. This is what they felt, right now we can, I suppose, rock and roll really in some respects. The other incident of note is Maurice McGrath in his witness statement mentions Maurice of Cahir there, that they I suppose they went they were at the boot, canvassing at the boot, and the local, this is down here in Ballyporeen actually, the local mad sergeant, he called for military to remove him, and no one came, so he basically left after in disgust, went mad basically. But so again, good old intimidation. So again, as I said, the red is national events. So now it's getting serious, obviously, with Sulhead Beg, and on the same day, the first all meeting. So again, Sean Tracy, prior to that, he'd have been the one organising the volunteers around here primarily, and with Ed McGrath from Cahir going around organising the volunteers. Not so much Seamus Robinson, Dan Breen or Sean Hogan. It was Sean Tracy was the one that was the chief organiser. The aftermath of Sulhead Beg. So as we discussed in Burncourt that night, they basically came down, Dan Breen, Sean Tracy and Sean Hogan, and they came down, they were heading for Cahir, they were actually heading for Ballylubia in some respects as well, but that was, they were warned not to go there, by Thomas Ryan's farm. And so they, on the 24th of 1943, of the big four, Breen, Tracy and Hogan, passed through Skeheenarinky and the days after Sulhead Beg on the way from Burncourt to Mitchelstown. And likewise, again, not too long after, actually, they come through on the way to meet Liam Lynch, very, very early days, you know, when Liam Lynch was getting prominent in Cork, and they were, you know, so they used, this is their route over the Galties, basically. So again, they went from Marion Tobin's there in Burncourt Castle up to Butlers here in McGrath's. Actually, we believe O'Brien's in Bahena, and then to Christy Ryan in Mitchelstown. They stayed for a while. So that was post Sulhead Beg. Again, so now I suppose Sulhead Beg has ignited it. You know, the I suppose the military side of it, and Sinn Féin are still meeting, but. And just out in Ireland here, we had the first barracks raid in April 1919. There was actually a John Welch from Skeheenarinky caught with an Tuglacht in Morris Hylas Hounds at Barnahown, and he got a month, I think, for it. And Airdriecht and Ballyporeen with Skeheenarinky participants. Airdriecht is music, dance, festival, sport, all Gaelic. So again, they're still very visual. And in September 1919. Wales and Raid, led by Liam Lynch, I suppose, really, where there was the first casualty in there, and direct from my after. So again, it's getting quite more serious. It's now gone. The politics is, Sinn Féin are there, but really it's taken over militarily. With Sinn Féin, you can still hear, but they're the same people, really, in some respects. A large attended meeting of the Skeheenarinky Sinn Féin Club, passed a vote of condolence and passed on Pierce McCann MP. And Pierce McCann was very much involved in Frognock in 1916 as well. He'd have been one of the local leaders. And again, this is just a paper from John Welch being outside in Barnahown, caught with an Tuglacht. And so again, that was, it was quite serious. And he was bound to the peace, as you can see there. The local Airdriecht again, which is and with Tipperary military and Cahir military again, and they're coming out trying to break up these, basically. You know, they see the GA, they see all this as the hotbed of what Sinn Féin and the IRA are about. And they try to come out and get quite frustrated, try to break up these, and that's what this is all about. By 1920 as well, the RAF are actually flying over, and these are reports flying over. They come off generally from Fermoy, head down, sometimes south, sometimes north, to the Galties here, and swing around, and they report. You can see them here, this is what they're reporting, seeing. And they're looking for rebels. Sometimes they're actually dropping leaflets as well, as it happens, strangely enough. And as you can see at 1:45 in March 1920, nothing to report, likewise nothing to report. So, again, that was probably unknown to the locals. And again, this is, I suppose, the next set of events. The more, there's quite a few people in the hall here that are quite up, that research this stuff as well. But the more you research the War of Independence, the more it goes back to land. And the Galties is no different than that. There was lads' agitation. The lands were driven up the Galties once they improved the lower to the better. And then and you can just imagine, irrespective of the famine and all that, they improved the lands, and the more improvement they did, the more tax they were taxed. So the more you research it, the more it comes back to that. And the Galties is no different. And here in early 1920, in the Buckley estate there, I read warning letters. Actually, we'll jump onto them. Actually, you'll see them here. There's warning letters. The agent, steward, workmen and mountain shepherds have been served threatening notice to clear out, the object being to recovery of mountain grazing lands. 5,000 sheep are straying through the country. And then in June, Abel Buckley, Gaeltacht Castle, through his solicitor, opened negotiations with influential local Sinn Féiner, Dennis McGrath, and settlement was agreed resulting from Sinn Féin Arbitration Court established by P.J. Maloney. So again, this is actually quite a big coup for them because they've now taken over from the petty sessions, that would have gone through the British system of legal system. And that's what they're really interested in, is saying we can govern. That's what that is about, really. Then we get local elections in June 1920. And again, Patrick McGrath from Cahir House there. Patrick would have had the business in the pub in McGrath's in Burncourt as well, the shop and pub. And he's elected. You can see the candidates. Again, there's a clean sweep more or less for Sinn Féin again. Patrick McGrath is proposed by Patrick Walsh, Coolagarn Row, and seconded by Patrick Brady, Coolagarn Row. And he tops the poll with 726 votes, 29% of the vote. And they're all Sinn Féin, as you see down along here. They more or less take over the local elections as well. And that's historic really for Mary McGrath of Tincurry House. She also got elected the First Lady. And she was seriously influential as well, that house, with all the leakers, very well known. And again, in the Cahir district elections, Dennis McGrath is elected and subsequently elected chairman of the Cahir District Council. And again, Sinn Féin more or less cleaned the boards. And Coolagarn Row voting was in Skeheenarinky National School. So again, quite organised, but again, they're sweeping the boards. It's getting a bit more serious. I suppose the military are fine, Sinn Féin, but now with all the activity going on, and this is one indiscriminate shooting in Skeheenarinky School. And you can see here at the bottom, the red part at the bottom left, a lorry containing military and police passed by the schoolhouse at Skeheenarinky, a shot being discharged into the grounds where the children were at play. And this is noted in quite a few reports, actually, and even Ned Dorney in the book there, Happy Days and Hard Days and Happy Days from Carl and Ed, notes very similar. And even my own aunt, Sissy Willems, noted the same. Talking to one time, she said when they threw apples in that they wanted to touch them, that the military, when they passed. When you read the report, they continued on to Cahir and they shot 2 geese and 15 ducks and took them away with them. So again, that's tough going, like any day. But the Skeheenarinky volunteers are getting quite active now. And again, some of it is pleasant, some not so much, But here in July 1920, a young man was arrested by Skeheenarinky volunteers for assaulting a young girl. And a court being held, he was sentenced for transportation for 5 years. And while what this is all about, again, is like the land, they're taking control. They want to be seen, we're in charge here. And that's where they get their support. They're contributing to railway strikes here, the Railway Strikers Fund, £32 again in 1920 is, they hadn't the whole pile, and yet they're contributing to these national funds continuously. So the volunteers are very active here. In August 1920, the RIC are getting a lot of pressure. There had been a lot of remote barracks around the place. And like you see up in the top road there, at Rahil, I suppose, they had Burncourt, Ballyporeen here, Ireland. So they were scattered all over the place. Some were quite remote. Obviously, Rahil is very remote. So they were starting to abandon these, really, because they were easily attacked. They weren't easily defended, really, in some respects. So this night, in August 1920, they went to break it up. But they were meeting above in Skeheenarinky. There's a lot of confusing reports, but in that they thought they were going to break. They were actually going to break up the shooting range as well. In that thing, at the same time. So they basically destroyed the barracks. Now there's still probably some of it's still standing up there. That's a picture, recent enough picture here, Rahil. But they got compensation then, and Dennis McGrath refused the compensation actually because he was chairman of the council. So again, they're influential. The early October, while they've been successful in some of the attacks, they now realise the flying column has started in Limerick, come to Cork and Tipperary as well. And the first one starts here with Dinny Lacey flying column, and this is Dinny here. And basically that's taking hand-picked men and from 25 to 40 and going around doing ambushes, because they're all on the run anyway. And this is very different, a significant change. It's and we'll see what that means to Skeheenarinky fairly shortly. Disaster strikes in some respects in October 1920 when Sean Tracy, and this is Sean here, and the funeral at Kilfeacle is killed. Sean would have been, while he didn't maybe take the leading role in like he let Seamus Robinson be the commander, he was the real heart of it, really, I think, to be honest. When you read down through the organisation, the planning, looking ahead, and he was a serious loss to the organisation. And again, national events, hunger strikes, 1920, Michael Fitzgerald, who had raided Ireland barracks, but he was covered in arms after, and he was, again, he dies in 1920 October, and followed shortly by Terence McSweeney's, and these were quite big blows. But again, it did have the reaction of it imbued the locals, to fight on. So Skeheenarinky is starting to get more active now, and that they formed the second one. Sean Hogan leads in November 1920, starts up the second flying column. Then he's up and running. And I suppose days later, then Bloody Sunday happens with Michael Hogan being shot dead. And again, at this stage, just after, Dennis McGrath in the pub was arrested, actually, more or less straight after Bloody Sunday. He's arrested, brought up and interned in Ballykenler, along with quite a few people in Burncourt as well around the same time. And he didn't get out for another, he was there for a year, actually, over a year. And again, Kilmichael, which we're all well aware of. So as you can see, the intensity is starting to happen. And Tipperary is no different than this. This is the well-known picture of the flying column, and we'll go through it there a bit after, a bit more detail. So, 3rd Tipperary number 2 active service unit, our flying column as we know it really. And this was comprised of the 5th Battalion at Clonmel and the 6th Battalion in Cahir. And so they all generally more or less contributed. But when you look down along here, Grey came 2, Skeheenarinky had 9 in it. Ballypreen had 8, Burncourt had 3, and various other ones as well. The hardcore is about 40, but and no difference. These are armed with rifles and revolvers primarily, not so much shots, some with shotguns. So Sean Hogan was the OC here. Jack Nagle Nguyen was the vice OC, and Maurice McGrath from Cargill was the column adjutant, and that stayed right through till the end. The corps was 40. They were supplemented with local company armed with shotguns, and the active area would have been Cahir, Clonmel area, but also operated in County Waterford and Kilkenny. And that was primarily because the heat was coming on here, they had to move laterally into it. So as you can see, there's quite a big influence from and they're handpicked really. And I get the question a lot, why wasn't Johnny Carney in it? He was one of the best fighters, but as you see from Dan Breen, he said, no, you have to stay here locally. We need your calibre and that as well. And sometimes people had to stay and mind their own, had to run the business farms as well and different things. But so and some people, as you'll see now in a minute, came on in different ways. But they had it well sussed, I suppose, in some respects. If they took all the good people and depleted the locals, it wouldn't have served them either. That would have been counterproductive. So they kept in areas, and you see that in the pensions collection, men and women in some respects. They say, no, you cannot. For example, Marion Tobin was never in Cumman on. They said, no, you can't join. We don't want you in Cumman on. We want you to do what you're doing. You're more valuable. But that came against on the pensions later on years. But so they did think these things through. As they say themselves, they weren't worried about pensions. They were worried about fighting the British. So this is the Skeheenarinky Flying Column members. Maurice McGrath, as we said, company adjutant. Chris Conway, or Kit Conway. Mike Fogarty. Bill Mulcahy. Now, Bill generally operated in the Ballypreen Company primarily, but he obviously from the caves there. The Sniper Lundigan. I know the Sniper was laterally Glengar, but he would have come from Raheen at this stage. Ned Mulcahy again. Gabriel McGrath. Wilmer Bryan, again, was primarily Bill O'Brien in the Ballypreen Company. Michael Regan, James Regan, David Fitzgerald. So they're the core from Skeheenarinky. Now, bear in mind, a lot of people would have come in from Skeheenarinky with him. They'd have joined up, Johnny Cannon would have joined up, there were other Regans would have joined up to mind him, and you'll see that coming up. But so there's quite a number of minutes. Around the same time, actually, this is covered quite a lot in the Burncourt one, but I'll just go briefly recap it because it covers Cargill. This is in the notorious, I suppose, from Claheen and Cahir. They used to come out to do raids, primarily in Burncourt. Burncourt, a lot of hassle. But this 3rd November, they came up from Ballypreen. They called Edmund Fox and Kilmanogue first, looking for his son. They then went looking for Pat McGrath and Morris. They called to the farm, and they terrorised them there, and eventually ended up in McGrath's shop in Burncourt, where they did find them. Now, this is about 12 o'clock, and this is about midnight here. By the time they got to Burncourt, it was 1 o'clock. And again, it's covered quite a detailed, and we reenacted in fairness to Burncoat Tram site. He did in the Burncoat one, so I'll just very quickly recap it. Again, this Edmund Fox and Lizzie Fox. They were in their 60s and 50s last year, and Pat was there actually, and they asked him, was he a member of the Burncoat Company area? He said he was, and they gave him quite a beating, but they burnt the hay barns. You can see from the compensation, hay barns, dairy, fowl house, the hay, straw, cows. This is all the compensation. And as a result, he had to sell 16 of his 24 cows because he had nothing to feed them for the winter. So, and they threw him out of house and home. So it was quite serious, this wasn't just a warning. They didn't call to McGrath's, Cargill House. They did the same, but the difference here was that Pat wasn't there, or Morris wasn't there. And this is Pat and his wife, Bridget McGrath, which is Nick Carney, actually, and old Patrick. But again, they threw Patrick, 78, and his wife, 63, out on the road. They threatened to shoot him. And this is Lieutenant Gaffney and Lieutenant Jones. They're quite notorious. They asked the sons were at home. They threatened to burn them down. And they basically put them out on the road and broke some delf and the windows. And they fired a few shots as well. So they continued on to Burncoat. And basically, in 1 o'clock in the night now, right, in Burncoat. And I suppose when you do these things, I suppose a lot of this thing for me is important to remember these people, and the photographs, as you can see, it's very visual. It helps it big time. But greatly enhanced later on today from, I see Gary down to Gary Gleeson, has some great photos, and you'll see him coming up here. So this is McGrath's pub here, Patrick, and I'll go through the detail there when we come to the next few slides. But this is McGrath's. Pat McGrath had quite a business, the McGraths themselves, collecting eggs. And this, as you can see here, the truck. Now, this would have been probably maybe after the war. Pat McGrath Burncoat on the side of it. And it's quite substantial. This is definitely Pat. This is Morris. I'm not too sure about the other ones. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll be doing knocking on doors to find out, do we know who the rest of them are. But this is a Bridget Gleeson McGrath glass plate collection that Gary has done a great job in. But they're remarkable photos. And what you can see there, the clarity is even more, the actual glass photos. So I'm not sure if too many have seen these before, but they're excellent. And this is McGrath's pub here, on the right here. It hasn't changed that much, bar the entrance into it, which is Ryan's now. But the windows exactly the same. This door is now a single door. But this is it more or less thin. So what happened, they came along, they were disguised, some had masks. They had, as we said, burnt the foxes out of it. They threatened the elderly McGraths, and here they came. They more or less nearly broke the door down. They came to the window, I think Patrick, and they came down. And as I was saying in the house was, we just go back, 1 or 2 here, was Patrick, Morris, and Jimmy. Now Jimmy was only young for the time, he was Patrick's son. And without going through it again, long story short, they basically more or less left Morris for dead. Patrick for dead, and Morris likewise. They broke quite a few Morris ribs, but Patrick got a severe beating there. And they broke into the bar, drank it out, more or less. A lot of the eggs, they broke them all up. As it happens, the McGraths were I suppose they were getting revolvers down from Dublin in the eggs. So they had good information, but they didn't get any that night. But they basically left them out here on the street. And Morris got a severe beating that night from the Black & Tans. And eventually they actually went back in, and they started firing it along the way, even as they went back to Cahir Cahir. As I said, that's reenacted in the other one. As it happens, Morris, in the aftermath, Morris actually went to for claims for the same as the Foxes got their hay reimbursed, whatever. But he was going for malicious claims, and in April, May. Now, bear in mind, this is still the troubled time, 1921. We moved on a bit, but he was looking for compensation at 2,600. But the British were still looking for him. And bear in mind, he had scaled over the wall into Cahir jail, into Cahir hospital. They concealed him there for a number. It took him a long time to recover, even just to get back to normal. And eventually, he actually immigrated. This is his passport here to Australia, with America, via Sri Lanka and all these, and India. And it just happens a truce came in, so he actually came back again. But really, it did affect him in later life, big time. And he died quite young, actually, from the severe beatings. So again, Skeheen, we move at 1921, and Skeheen is getting probably more active and locally. And these are the events which we'll cover in the next ones, which will ultimately lead to Crossbarry at the end. 1st of January 1921, an unknown body is found at Kiltankin. So when the people, Skeheenarinky, were going down to Mass in Ballyporeen, quite early. On New Year's Day, they discovered a body just thrown inside the field. You see them in location here at the moment. And these are the reports, and that's the sequence. So again, it's probably easy to do it, better do it with the, this is the map. So coming down from, as I suppose to call Milneas Cross really, coming down, just at Liss here, and this is Patrick and Kate Lyons here, and this is John and Maggie Mullins, so it's still Mullins, and this is James Sheehan actually. So basically there was a body here with a bit of cardboard on it, with spy wrote on it, and the gunshot wounds. Now they went straight down to Ballybreen to Mass, told Father Keating. He came into the barracks here, told them, and they were a bit dubious because they thought it might be booby-trapped, but eventually they went up to get the body. And there was 3 gunshot wounds. As I said, a small card with spy written it, and there was cartridge wads again, which is the spent part of the cartridge. And they commandeered, I think from Lyons is here, so one of the Lyonses, and little Johnny Carney. They made them bring him down to the barracks here, the body. They had no idea who it was. As it transpires, it took them, as you probably see here, from January up to May. They realised it was Michael McGrath from hospital, and he was basically captured in a hospital, and as not so much as a spy, but more he was given passing information, and they held him around Limerick and around Knockaday. They court-martialed him, and they brought him in Tipperary. They knew well what they were doing. They brought him in Tipperary and shot him, and so they had no idea. As I said, it took him months. Eventually, he actually had his wife was Florence, and she had 10 children, and she eventually got. He actually was a British soldier, but he was a teacher. And by all accounts, he probably drink had something to do with the pub, that he was passing on information and going out in sorties. So, but again, he ended up in Kiltankin in the start of the year. So, and again, here we have Pat McGrath later on that you're looking for. They're making a collection around locally, actually. Now, I can't find where, this was quite common, making collections for people, with houses burnt or whatever. But because his beating was so bad and his business was so much affected, presentation of Patrick McGrath. Now, I haven't found the substitution list yet. Cahill's Cross. Again, this is one of them where you get the information comes locally, from verbally, from passed down, from the records, from the newspaper, from the compensations. And I probably just want to concentrate a bit on this, actually, just to give you an idea of what, because people say, what did my grandfather, what did my grandmother do? So they didn't do anything, but this is what they really did. And this gives a very good example of it. And I'll just show you, there's quite a lot of detail there. And the information comes from, as you can see here on the right, from Maurice Fitzgerald, Maurice McGrath, the court records, Mike Fogarty, directly with John English, and I suppose Maurice McGrath via Maurice Crotty. Some of it verbally, some of it records. So there's quite a bit of detail there. And yet, when you put this all together, it gives you the full story. Ellie Hoyle, Lily Kiley again. So I suppose it's probably best go back. This is Cahill's Cross. And this is Mike Fogarty, the main person involved here. So this is what it was looking at the time. And if I just go back actually to the slide, I just want to give you an idea who was there at the time. And I've taken all I've taken all the modern houses out of it, left it back with the good old houses. So you've Cahill's, Bridget Donnan, you've Crotty's here as well, Fogarty's and Johnny Carney. Now the flying column are in the area. Sean Hogan's flying column. Their headquarters is John and Kate Carney, so Johnny Carney's house, which, and bear in mind, they had different headquarters. They consider this Lower Cooligan Row. They stayed at Johnny Carney's. Upper Cooligan Road, they stayed at Welch's. In Skeheenarinky, Black Road, they stayed in Kiley's, and at times up at Highlands. So they were their headquarters. So the officers, John Hogan, Maurice McGrath, Nagel, and a few more staying here. There's 6 staying at Cahill's. There's people staying in Donald's, Crotty's, and Fogarty's. And people say, I suppose what you'll see from this is that we'll get to the incident in a minute, but inside this house, John and Kate are there, and they're in their 50s, and Johnny is 26. Johnny is actually up at the top road here, putting scouts at the crosses at Foxes, let's say, on the way up there. He's putting scouts out there. I think it's Michael McGrath was the scout there. Fogarty is a scout here. Mike Fogarty is a scout here at the crossroads. So there's basically a ring road. There's generally 2 layers of scouts. And that's what the locals did. They minded the flying column when they were in the area. So they knew where they were, and they went up with scouts. So, but again, people say John and Kate Carney, James and Mary Cahill, Bridget Donald, they fed them. That's what they did. While they weren't members, they were absolutely, there'd have been no Dan Breen, Michael Collins, Sean Tracy, only for these people really, to come in on, and these people, the Cahils, the Donalds, the Fogartys, the Kearneys, and that's clearly illustrated. They could not stay there otherwise. So in Cahils you had James and Mary, and their father actually, Daniel, was a widow at that stage, 70s, and the aunt Alice, and the young Cahils then, they're quite young, 4, 3 and 2. But again, there were 6 of the flying columns staying here that night, for the night. Bridget Donnelly again likewise. As I said, the Crotties as well, and up at Fogarty's again. So they were, now the Fogartys had the people in black here, the people highlighted in black I should say, they're volunteers. They've gone off, they're with the Hogan, or they're out scouting. So that gives you a good idea, and that same happened in Kiley's, the same happened in Welsh's or Highlands. They just put a ring around it and minded it, and that was their thing. So we'll get to the ambush itself, not an ambush, but the incident, I suppose, really. So moving on through the detail. So Mike Fogarty's at this crossroads here. He's actually joined by one of the Donalds. He's about 37. And I know this sounds crazy, but he's actually too old for volunteers. These were, Mike Fogarty, these would have been 19, 20, 21. But the Donald, he came down, I think his name, he came down for just have a chat, to smoke and whatever. This is about close to midnight now. And you look up, that's Cahill's house here, so that's looking up towards the Galties. So the RIC, they generally have quite good information at the times as well. They know that they're in the area. And the RIC come out from Cahir, and Potter is the one actually, Gilbert Potter is the one leading him, who unfortunately, you'll see later on, lost his life. They were supposed to meet military, I think, from the other side, but then they decided to take off. So they probably, I think they dismounted more or less, I think, now, I know, and the guard the houses, they have that way up to their house wasn't there at that time. The entrance down to Cairns from the top road. So they marched along here. Bear in mind, Mike Fogarty is here, chatting to the Donalds for the night. And he hears voices coming over along the road there. There's the black and tans, basically. I think there's about 8 of them coming along. And he shouts out, "Who's there?" Now, they had a passport, but the first RIC fellow shouts back, "Who's there?" back to him. That obviously wasn't the passport. And Mike Fogarty again shouts, "Who's there?" And back comes the word, "Police." And he is as I said, the scouts didn't have rifles, they generally had shotguns. And he let fire. He fired into where he had the voice coming from. As it happens, it took effect, hit your man in the wrist. Arthur O'Brien, he was a constable at Glasgow, I think, or Black and Tan from Glasgow. It hit him in the wrist. So the RIC don't know, and the Black and Tans don't know what's happening. Mike Fogarty runs up towards Cahill's. Young O'Donnell got such a fright, he kept running up the road, all the way up near the Foxes at this stage. Mike Fogarty had been, I suppose, trained. They had been drilling. The other fellow hadn't. He didn't know what was happening, so he just ran. Mike Fogarty was quick enough to let 2 shots off here again with the shotgun. And that was one to warn the people up in the other houses, up the Galty. So they've been staying up here up the top road as well. And quick thinking. Had 2 effects. One, the Black and Tans thought it was a full ambush. And they started firing for the next hour or 2 into fields, ditches and everything, thinking it was a full on-scale ambush, the 2 shots. The remarkable thing about it was the people in the Cahils didn't hear the shots. And I know this can happen, it seems. I was asking a few. The rest of them, they heard it in Kearney's, Don's all the way up along. Bear in mind, Johnny Kearney isn't here. So this is the headquarters. Normally you go back to the headquarters. But they realised, the shots were too close. So they all took off and they headed for Kiley's that night. They realised, so they all, again, very drilled, very organised. Mike Fogarty dumped a gun in a quarry up around here somewhere, I think to the left up around. But they all end up by Kiley's. Now, bear in mind, this is midnight, so 1 o'clock or something. It just takes me a few hours to get up there. Meanwhile, the RIC or the British are still firing away down below, thinking it's a full on-scale ambush. And Potter was the one, and this is the official report. A party of police under command of D.I. Cahir, which is D.I. Potter, were cooperating with military at Coolantala, which is totally wrong. It's actually Coolaghan Row, district of Cahir, on the early morning of the 22nd of February 21. They were fired upon by a party of rebels at 1:45. So again, the party of rebels was Mike Fogarty, basically. And this is what they looked. This is actually a picture from Ireland, more or less at the time. This is what they looked like when they came out. This is the reports: deadly ambush, Ballybreen affair, injured constable claims. So, and again, this police patrol was fired on Monday night between Borncourt and Skeheenarinky, County Tipperary martial law area. 1 constable was wounded, official report. So again, it's quite detailed there. And I suppose the effect is that they combed the area for a number of days and they searched every house. And it was a martial law area. So if you're caught with anything, if your list is not open the door, you're in trouble. You're brought to the court. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy. It was quite tough. And as I said, going back to them people feeding them and all that, that was, they contributed to me very heavily, those people in those houses, and not just there, all up around Skeheenarinky. And as far as I can see, I was doing the safe houses, which to me it looks like every house is a safe house. In some respects, they all contributed. But the local volunteers, again, this people ask a lot, what did they do? Well, they weren't on the flying column, but this is what they did. They dug trenches on the Mishtown Road. They blew up the bridge up. They blew up between, here you can see the reports, bridge blown up near Buncourt. Military convoy fired at Kilcorn, ambushed in Cahir Mishtown Road. There was about 400 there, I reckon. The British report said, it was, it was local volunteers. And again, they said the rebels who were probably hiding out in the Galtee Mountains. So this is all the Skeheenarinky and Buncourt, I suppose, volunteers. And again, the main road is a problem for them because they come out from Cahir, they can get out quite quickly. So that's the whole, bringing up the bridges, knocking all these things. We move on to March then, and this is the flying column, Sean Hogan's flying column again. They were quite determined to capture the barracks here. They had quite that March they had quite a few attempts, and this is one of them here. Constable William Lamont shot. Report shot at 8:30 while returning from a public house to the RSC barracks. 5 shots, of which 3 took effect. Bill Mulcahy was checking the Lidl. So this is what actually happened, really. Bill Mulcahy was sent down to check what was happening, and he went to the Lidl land, and one of them had come out to the pub and was heading back to the barracks, and basically shot him and got his revolver. He did actually shoot him, but he didn't die from it. But he got the revolver. So that kind of put the attack off, really, but he did get the revolver, I suppose. And you see here the next day then, that was a Friday, I think the next day then, or Sunday, Saturday and Sunday, military from Mine Laheen round up every man in the town and the immediate district, including Skeheenarinky, and took some 40 prisoners to Mitchelstown and 10 to Laheen. So again, it's getting quite serious. This is probably the most infamous. They attacked this barracks here 3 times in March. This is the one we probably most know about. And again, the detail is in here, but I'll quickly go through it because again we would have covered this. But this is the flying column. This is all the Sean Hogan's flying column. But again, they're supported by the Regans, the Foxes, and all the ones in Skeheenarinky with the scouting. These are all scouts all around the area. So the flying column doesn't operate without them. And this time they're staying up in Kiltankin, actually, closer to it. So one incident of note here is that Kit Conway has come back from fighting in the First World War as a British officer, or British Army man, I should say. So he didn't come back through traditionally. He wasn't in the volunteers. He just came back and he wanted to join up. In truth, they didn't trust him. But he was in. So this was the first attack after. And Tommy Ryan from Tubbert, that's the hall here, where this is actually exactly where we are. Hasn't changed much. The bit I'm standing is extended. It was 3 windows down that time. This is Farrell's pub here. Carney's here and Russell's. This is, I suppose, at the time O'Brien's, but is now just the corner shop there. And the stars are where the Sean Hogan's flying column are. The handball alley isn't as much constructed in there as well, around the back. But they put Kit Conway more or less lying on the ground at the corner at Keneally's, as we call it, and Tom Ryan was behind him. And Tom Ryan's instruction was, if that Kit Conway didn't fight, to shoot him. They didn't trust him. As it transpires, he was probably the best of them, because he had the military experience and he became the one that trained them all. But Tom Ryan was supposed to shoot Kit Conway if he didn't attack fully, and as it transpires, he was the best of them. Moving on that night again, and this is covered quite a bit in the Ballypreen one, but the Black and Tans came out. The fight lasted maybe about half an hour. They went back up to Kiltankin, moved away. Not very successful, really, I'll be honest. They just did a lot of... the strange thing was, Pat Russell's book above him, he has the old books, and you can see the morning after this, the RSC buying new Delph. Now, I think they got reinforcements, or they broke it through the windows, whatever. So they got the Delph anyway. Didn't capture any rifles. But I suppose in some respects, rightly, when they came in here, they told them that a lot of shots came from the opposite right, Farrell's. And Farrell's, they were very Republican as well. They were involved in the volunteers as well, the Sons, the Carneys, maybe up to in Kiltankin were. But long story short, the Black and Tans burnt Farrells, Carneys, and along here, and they actually burnt some of the Leahy's as well and some other places to less degree, but these are burnt to the ground. And as I said, that's the from the early picture. You can see Farrells is quite different now. They all got compensated, obviously, at that time. Well, laterally, I suppose, really. And that's from the Black and Tans. And again, here's the reports that went worldwide. Again, the Kiltankin escape. So these are coming hot and heavy, right? The 1921 again in March, same end of the month. So this took Sean Hogan's column again, so there's no let up. And in this one, again, this is the known as Kiltankin or Ballygibbon escape, the miracle escape, really. And this time they're staying in this house here, very close to where the body was found, actually. This is the house here, Patrick and Kate Lyons, that's the headquarters. So again, Sean Hogan, Nagel and McGrath are here, and the rest of them are scattered around in Carneys, in Rowlands, all the farms around. But it's they probably stayed there too long. They stayed there a couple of days. In fact, so much so they organised the O'Briens and Ballygibbon at a dance, and the information went back to the British. Again, good information in one respect, and again, it's probably best to go through the maps. And these are accounts from Thomas Kiley. Thomas Kiley was doing scout duty up again as far up as the top of the road, but even though they were in Kiltankin, so the two rings. And early in the morning, Maurice Regan here and Thomas Kiley, they were going to go back to the farming, to get the milk, and they see the military coming out at that time in the morning. And they eventually got down to warn the people, and it walked the street really in some respects, because again, they knew exactly where they were, but the farmers then were getting up to the milk, bringing the milk to the creameries, and the women who come out and they were offering the British military. Bear in mind, they'd been out about 4 o'clock that morning. They were offering tea and bread to slow them down. And I walked the street, a frosty March morning. So by the time they got to, now when I say when they got there, and this is where they came from, the military, about 5,000, between 3,000 and 5,000, from Cahir, Clonmel, Tipperary, Mitchelstown, Kilworth, Fermoy, Moore Park and Laheen. And their centre was Ballygiblin Crossroads. So that's where they said we'll do an encirclement movement, and we end up there. Unknown, this was known to the column. So the column were based in Kiltankin, and they got Maurice McGrath and primarily David Moore, because he was local, to lead him out of it. And their intent was to head across here, actually head to Ballygiblin, head into the Mitchelstown area. They felt that was safe. Head away from the Galleys. They felt they had cut off the Galleys, and they had a machine gun up the Galleys, as Johnny was telling me there one time. They were anticipating they'd head up that way. So again, March morning, they head across Kiltankin. The military had more or less caught up with them nearly at that stage. They had slowed them coming down from the top road and up from Ballyporeen. So they're coming everywhere. They arrested every male they came across. Once you're simple as that, you're arrested. They end up for a bog, and the British by that time were on the horseback had caught up with them. And by all accounts, they could have shot him. But I think the British thought, well, we have these lads. They got to the bog, a horse got caught in the bog, and whatever convention the British have, they stopped to get the horse out. If they'd kept going, they'd have got him. So there's numerous miracle escapes in this. They eventually get down here towards Ballygiblin, and do ahead of Ballygiblin Cross. At the same time, Hannah Hanrahan out in Linnacunna, she was a teacher in Ballygiblin. She was heading to work on a bicycle, and she again see all the military, so she kind of knew what was happening. And she see the lads, I think it's Maurice McGrath or someone of them. She got a Dave Morris would say, sorry, and saw them coming along, and she warned them, don't go to Ballygiblin, exactly what they're heading. So again, that saved them in effect. They eventually crossed the road above, and again, they don't know how did they escape across the road, because they could see the British military dismounting, and the only conclusion they came to after was that they thought they actually were military as well. The British thought they were British, because they crossed the road with their rifles. They had no choice, they couldn't go back. They were freeing the horse. They eventually ended up in Tide who directed them into Haggart. This is roughly a picture from reconstruction. There was briars growing all over it. Again, numerous escapes, and they could actually see the horse for a bog from here escaping. But again, in some respects, this is seen as Sean Hogan's finest hour as the column leader. Others criticising that he stayed too long with the dance and things like that. But when he got in here, he did become the leader, came out in him, I suppose, really, in some respects. And he instructed him to hide all the dispatches, like they were in here, to bury all dispatches and to get the guns and rifles they had. But they got to Tygmolens at the ditch there, and they I suppose the British knew they were there. They'd follow them in horseback. They could see them. They got to the road, and they'd come out from Mitchtown. They knew they hadn't gone past them, absolute. So they knew they were in the area, and yet they couldn't find them. Tyke Molan was arrested like every male. He was gone off before they had minutes later. They kept searching. From where they were, they could see him up in trees. They could see him, the British looking around, and eventually an officer, about my height by the sounds of it, came in and with glasses in the middle of the field, and he looked around twice around the ditches. And Sean Hogan at this stage, right lads, we're going 2 by 2. He says we're going to be shot. We're dead anyway if they catch us. So he said, go 2 at a time and take what you can. He says, we're not going to come out 25 of us, whatever, and shoot kill as many as you can. That was, so yeah. So we're back and running again. Apologies, sorry for that. And a few times during the day they said the act of contrition, thinking this was the end game as well. Again, they had another narrow escape here in this corner. When the horses got free, the horse came up the lane, and the horse wouldn't jump over. There was a small low stone fence, and by all accounts, Bill Mulcahy from the Caves was just inside there. If it jumped over, it landed on him. And again, the horse refused. They came around, and so they had multiple. As I said, it's considered a miracle in their minds on that day. So again, I think that's something we'll probably look at a bit more. And I know I see Eamon down there. We'll get the exact field and where it was, and look at that a bit more. Again, not too soon after. This is March. Now, when they did come out to finish off, they came out. The British just couldn't find them. As I said, arrest every man. And at about 6 o'clock that evening, they sent up flares. And again, the trench, they thought, this is it, we're done. And again, get ready, act of contrition, and we're good to go. But the flares were for the military to say, come on, we're done, all come to Ballygibbon or dismount and go back to base. That took about an hour. So at about 7 o'clock, the Cumman on, they came down with galvanised buckets of tea and sandwiches. And it took them another hour because they'd been lying you can imagine a frosty March morning from early morning till 7 o'clock that evening. They'd been lying, they were stiff, they were just solid, and it took them another hour. And then they eventually hit up the Galties again, up to Kilbenny, and for the night there again, and got away. So again, it was probably his finest hour in some respects. Moving on then to Garrymore in 24th of April. And again, this is all the same column, but this time they've come in with Dinny Lacey's column. And from here, the next couple of days get quite... again, when you look at these, history is a strange thing. When you look in isolation at something, you look at it, but when you put them all together, you see what these lads are at. And this is a good example of that. So Garrymore, Highlands crossover, I suppose, just outside Claheen. This is a bit more... sorry, get my pen working again. This is it here in a bit more detail. So Sean Hogan's column was at the left-hand side, as you come out of Claheen, and Dinny Lace is on the right-hand side. And they were expecting a big convoy, and they more or less had given up, actually. They were heading back. They thought they were starting to move off. Dinny Lace heading towards Newcastle, and Hogan back up towards Buncourt. But then the military came in horses, and they ambushed them. Primarily, I think the lads had actually moved off. They had to double back to start firing. They'd gone about 300 yards or something, they said. So, as well known, D.I. Potter came in. He was in Ballypreen on the day. Somebody came back from Ballypreen. He drove straight into it. And they recognised him. He had a car. And so they captured him. Dinny Lacey's column took him back towards Ballybacon, Newcastle area, ultimately to Denier. They actually met the British military again and had exchange. Sean Hogan's and all the Skeheen and Buncourt and all the Ballypreen members headed back up, actually through Rahil Wood as it happens. Buncourt put us into a message out to Johnny Carney. And Johnny again had all the HQs in Kiley's, and he had them all ready for that when they got there. So again, they marched back away. This actually little star here's a dugout actually, which we'll cover later on, just down from Kiley's. So they basically, I suppose they had captured arms at the Garrymore, but Potter was captured. And again, I won't go into too much detail because that's well dictated. But again, this is Johnny Carney getting and up the top road there was 2 lines of troops heading to Buncourt, 3 lines of troops came from the Cahir direction, others passed. So after Garrymore, they just swept the whole area. And the fascinating thing I find actually in this is that even though they're up at Kiley's, they could look down, they were quite comfortable there, the mountainous area. They didn't consider the top road that a threat, that they had enough time to get away. They didn't move on, they just watched them basically. the Gary Moore aftermath, as I suppose well documented, trainer, they wanted to exchange for trainer. Trainer was hung, and Potter was ultimately shot up in the Nire. So the thing about this is the day after, 25th of April, and this is probably Fitzgerald's house up by Eddie Maher there, up by the castle there, right? You take a right up there, up to have been Fitzgerald's, now King's. So this is the day after of, and again, some of the criticism of Sean Hogan was that why were they waiting there? Like, bear in mind, all they went on the day after. So this happened about midday. They were heading to Kiley's. They actually do manoeuvres twice a day at Kiley's, then head back again. But again, the British had got good information, absolutely good information, because they went more or less to the right roads. Now, I suppose this is up towards the Dugout and Foxes up here. This is up the Black Road and up the schoolhouse. And they went on 3 roads anyway, certainly. It's not that clear which 3, but they certainly obviously went up the middle too. And it's basically South Irish Horse or the auxiliaries, military from Cahir, simultaneously they raid the Black Road, Galtee Road, Castle Road and Mountain Road. And again, we'll just go through it here. It's probably better to get to the pictures. So this is Thomas and Hannah Fitzgerald's house at the time. They're in their 60s. In modern times, this is King's house, which is a bungalow this way. So this is the house, and these are the court-martial documents, which is from James Skinner in Mitchelstown. And James Curtin, in fairness, has the original. These are copies I have here. And it's an unbelievable document, historical document, really. And that's this is the map they drew at the time. Fitzgerald's, P. O'Brien, this is over the Galtee Sawmill, P. O'Brien, Skeheenarinky School, Dunley's, Jackson's Pub, and you'll see why they all become relevant in a minute. But again, as I said, the military went up all these roads in horse, and they searched every house up along. And they were right to search every house because the flying column would have been in generally most of the houses. In Fitzgerald's, you had David Moore from Crockmore, you had Kit Conway, and you had Frank Pine, the lane just down here. And they were members of Sean Hogan's common. So they were staying there, common enough. They'd been heading back to Kiley's. It was 12 midday. They'd been heading to Kiley's in for some training. That morning, Frank Pine went over to the Galtee Sawmill because he knew the lads. He walked up around here, and he went over to the Galtee Sawmill. So you'll see it from the next one. This is the house. So there's a bit going on here. The yellow one is the 6 Irish Horse come up. They go into the yard. Inside the house you have, bear in mind, Frank Pine is over at the sawmill. Inside the house you have Kit Conway, David Moore. There's no back door to the house, actually. The military accused Mr. Fitzgerald of throwing their arms out. They threw their rifles out the back here, 3 rifles and a few other bits they had. And Kit Conway comes out the front door, and he goes under one of the horses, and the horse bolts, and you can imagine the confusion. And the horses go all over the place. They run around the back here. These gathered the rifles as much as they could, and head up into the dike and get away through the wood, basically. The horses settle. They obviously not very happy, obviously. They find a bit of a rook rifle out the back here, and there's a few bits. There's no notice on the back of the door, which was an offence at the time. They went in, there's no notice there. They clearly can see from the beds. That's what they did. They went around and looked at how many warm beds. They said there's only Thomas Fitzgerald and Hannah and Morris, a nephew, or a grand-nephew, I think, yeah. But there's clearly more beds warm than that and all this kind of stuff. So they know there's more. As it happens in Search in the House, who comes around the corner? Frank Pine. He gets the warning over to Galtee Sawmill. There's a raid. He comes back to warn the 2 lads, walks straight into the military, and they arrest him. And that's the court-martial. In the aftermath then, the military arrest Frank Pine, Thomas Fitzgerald and Hannah Fitzgerald. They march them down the road. They leave Hannah go down more or less at the school ground. She goes back to look after the young fella. But they do arrest Frank and Thomas. The military raid for 2 days solid, day and night, in the whole area. So the flying column then heads over to Galtees. They were going to the Brigade headquarters in Rose Green. The British actually anticipate that, but luckily enough, the column have advanced members, and they meet them, and they engage and fire them. But they do get to Rose Green, they get away. The other part, at the same time, some of the column were not there. Morris McGrath wasn't. After Gary Moore, these lads here, and this is one of Gary Gleason's or Bridget Gleason's photos as well. It's remarkable, really. The same day as all this is happening up in Skeheen, they were sent into Clonmel to commandeer cars for the flying column. And why were these lads? One, they knew how to drive, basically. But they're all Clonmel or that area, bar Morris McGrath. And again, this is remarkable. This is them, so unknown to them, the rest of the column are above in Skeheen, when they're being attacked. But again, this is one of Gary's photos, which is, again, very, very clear. And it's a Bridget Leeson photo. I suppose the strange thing about it is Morris married Bridget, the woman that took the photo, I think in 1924, not too long after this, and lived in Claheen there, with the Leesons basically. These are the court-martial documents for prosecution witness Thomas McGrath. This is about 14 or 15 pages, and this is from James Skinner in Mitchelstown. This is his document. And it's a remarkable document. It's a field court-martial document. It's remarkable, really, in that it's utter, what Thomas Fitzgerald, what Frank Pine said, it's utter lies, to be honest with you. And what the British said is utter lies. Because the British said that Frank Pine was the fellow that ran around, 100%. Every one of them said he was the fellow that ran away with the guns. Frank Pine was the one that came around the corner. But likewise, Thomas Fitzgerald saying, Frank Pine walks with me, sure. He was only gone over. He was on Jackson's last night. He went up to the sawmill. He walks out in Ireland. He comes around every now and then. I give him loads of work. That's why he's here. So, but the field court, the military court martial didn't buy any of it anyway. Thomas Fitzgerald gets 3 years. He pays a fine of £100, or if he doesn't, he gets 6 months hard labour. He pays the fine in May 1921. Frank Pine gets 10 years penal servitude. They're both guilty, and this is signed for my. As it happens, that £100, this is James Skinner 1922 now, a couple of years later, that £100 more or less breaks, it does break Thomas Fitzgerald, you can imagine, £100. And this is James Skinner again, a couple of years later, getting compensation. This poor man lives up the Galtee Mountains, and the military last year surrounded the place, and a fine of £100 imposed on Fitzgerald. He is a small farmer with a wife and a dependent living with him. The fine of £100, which he paid, nearly ruined him. The British government, who have the money, should refund it. And he did get refunded, but that made his life a misery, actually. What happened to Frank Pine? Frank Pine obviously was sent to Spike Island initially, as you can see, and he ended up then in Kilkenny jail. And in November 1947, escaped through a tunnel. This is the truest times now. They got out through a tunnel, and Frank Pine was one of them. He eventually ended up immigrating to America and worked on the railroads as a mechanic. Going back to Gary Moore, the official reprisals. So this is nearly a month on. The British basically decide to blow up 6 houses as an official reprisal for Potter being shot. And it's Tom Gorman at the house at Burntcourt Castle. Tom actually is in Ballykenlet. His wife is there at that stage. Mrs. Tobin's in Tincurry. Edmund Mulcahy, Cooligan Row, and then Slattery and Keating again in Ballyluby, Kilbeg and Drumlemon. They actually had good information. All these people are very active. And this is the official order. This is John English here. That's the house we all know today, and this is the house still there actually. This is Edmund Mulcahy, the house before it. They broke it up. And this is with compensation they built after. But I'd like to bring up James actually there if he's ready to go there. This is an official reprisal. They basically blow up the house, everything, leave nothing standing. And this is a letter I came across in Kilkenny, actually, to the solicitors. And it's worth reading out, actually. John will read out there again. John is obviously his grandfather, Richie Leonard. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Richie Leonard, again, was in the volunteers. So again, we just read out the letter. So it's quite, paints a terrible story in some respects.
Okay, Cooligan Row, January the 16th, 1922. It's a letter he wrote. Dear Sir, in answer to your note of the 10th last, my house was blown up on the 13th of May, 1921 by Crown forces. All my furniture broken in pieces. The stones of the house were the only seats left us, and the only bedsteads we had was pieces of broken boards of broken furniture. Until I got the first instalment of the loan of £50, I had to fix up a barn. I had it as it was in a cowshed. I was from my May until November. I received £100 from the White Cross, for which I am thankful. It enabled me to fix up my barn and to get some furniture and bedsteads. I received no help of any kind until I got your loan, as I am a small farmer, only 8 or 9 Irish acres. I have 4 sons. One was interred. 2 had to take their rifles, and the 4th, a young fella, on the run and helping the fighting men in every way he could. So I could not describe to you properly what my wife and myself suffered having a visit from the military and the Black and Tans every week, once or twice, raiding and tossing everything about. I have not a picture of my house at present, but as soon as I can, I will get one and I will send it to you. With best wishes, I remain, dear sir, yours sincerely, Edmund Mulcahy.
So again, you can see from that's quite the hardship he had to go through, you know. I mean, and I know there's a lot of talks about burning big houses and all this, but this is reality in this part of the world. He had not much to begin with, but he ended up living in barns, as you see there. And, you know, I suppose don't forget that actually is exactly 100 years ago, more or less at this time. He would have been living in that barn. And with the stones left there as furniture, and a bedstead as well inside of it, where the animals was. I'd like probably a similar letter again to bring somebody of Vince there. There's me on Mary there, Mary Mulhern, and Mary's would be a grandniece of Ellen Kiley up the Black Road there, Ellen Highland. And again, this is Ellen writing to the pensions to get a pension. Now, she was more or less denied the pension, like a lot of them were. Maybe they hadn't much money, or but she wrote back in anger, and this is the letter that Ellie wrote, Ellie Kiley from the Black Road.
Cara, with reference to your letter on the 15th, I wish to state that I am indeed very disappointed, and I consider it an injustice. As regards further evidence, there is lots, but it is difficult to recall what happened over 30 years ago. I will just give you a few items. On one occasion, when Sean Hogan and his column were billeted in Lower Coolagarin Row, the enemy came upon them in the early hours of the morning. Well, Sean and his comrades, about 12 men at the time, got to my home by great strategy. My 3 brothers and I got out of bed and did scouting duty. I went to a neighbour's house over half a mile away. I will never forget it. It was a cold, dark, dismal March morning, about 5 o'clock, and I could hear the rattle of the enemy's lorries not far from me. I left my aged mother alone at home. I went to the said house as I was short of some provisions I needed for the column, who were cold and tired after their experience. On another occasion, there was a general roundup in our neighbourhood and some arrests. About 4 of the column were in our house, some of them in bed at the time. They had to fly at a moment's notice, one without his boots. My brothers had to fly also. I was left with my mother. I had to remove a rifle, not knowing if it was loaded or not. I also had to remove overcoats, papers and leggings belonging to the column to a place of safety. And I could see the enemy across the way from me when doing so. On another occasion, as I was doing dispatch duty for the column with a comrade, we could see lorries of Tans passing the road above us. I will never forget that sight as we travelled from Ballylooby to Skeheenarinky in a pony and trap full of arms, ammunition, papers and clothes. After the truce, when the officers of the Southern Division were in training at the Galtee Divisional Camp, I had several duties there, and I may add, I had to do all this under difficult circumstances in order to fulfil my duty to the Cumman mBan. Being the only girl in the family, I had to work very hard at home, often until 11 o'clock at night and very early in the mornings, while having to look after my mother, who was partly invalided. Perhaps you will ask why I didn't apply for the pension in 1934. Well, when we were doing this, we did not think of pensions. It was all voluntary. While I was able to work hard and had enough to carry on, I did not mind. Now, however, I am not able to work as well as I used to as a result of operations, etc. When the pension was granted to others, I know I thought I had as much right to it as anyone else, if not more. Sincerely yours, Mrs. Morris Hyland.
Thanks, Mary. And again, it's wrote with great clarity. It's probably wrote in anger, actually, to be honest, in frustration. A lot of those events she mentions there are the ones I've been talking about. The Gary Moore, Kiltankin, the Cal's Cross when they came up. That's when so the other events she's mentioning that she gets out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to go a half mile across the way to get provisions from, and in a March morning. And again, I suppose the most fitting sentence there is what she said: when we did it, we didn't think of pensions. That's what the frustration was. They did it out of Irish freedom, really. And yet they were being asked, for £1 or £2 a week to, question why that you're entitled to it. So, and again, that's some of the documents out you see at the front are quite similar, and the medal and the pensions files. So I'll just move on here a bit, so we get to the good music. This part is coming to a close actually soon enough. So again, this is summer 1921, obviously coming towards the end, really, in that respect. And again, this is Brackbawn Bridge, as it is now, actually. This is the bridge at Brackbawn. This is the top road, as we call it, built over it, as it happens. And again, the main road is blocked. A huge tree, which reaches from one side to the other. Large bridge at the Mountain Lodge, blown up recently, is still impassable. So again, there's quite a lot of activity up the top road from Skeheenarinky. And Michael McGrath, actually, that worked in the council, Gangaman, the council, he was one of the ones that lead it. And again, this is all, you must remember, the problem with this was when they destroyed the bridge and they broke it up, if the British came out the morning after, they accommodate the locals to put it back together again and make it passable. But they kept at it. They knocked trees and broke up the bridges. Sometimes, and what they would have done was, let's say they had in through Glengarra, they had a way for the locals to get around, to go to Crimmy, but that blocked off them, disguised. So again, they were very active right up to the end. And again, we're getting towards, as I said, this is July now, and the British, the one way to hurt the locals here is shut down the creameries, which they did in Bournecourt in July and Ballypreen here in June. You can see the posts out the front, actually. And that absolutely, as you can imagine, that crippled them. Now we're at the truce, 11th July 1921. And from a time frame, I stopped there. But we just show you some of the facts about the people. And it did, no disguise, it did take them by surprise here. But after post-truce, the divisional cabinet was above in Galtee Castle for 6 weeks, training officers. This is all the officers. This is Galtee Castle here, the locale of it. So, as again, from the earlier one, all the 2nd Southern Division officers were all up there. Mid Limerick, East Limerick, Tip number 2, Tip number 3, and Kilkenny. And it was a big drain, actually, I suppose, and locally, because Skeheenarinky, Bournecourt, Kilbehenny, Ballygiblin, Ballypreen companies, primarily, I think Skeheen, Kilbehenny, and Bournecourt, they're the ones that fed them, clothed them, did all this good stuff. So that was a big... and who was there? And this is there 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. Bugle call, lectures, field work, bayonet practice. It was a very regimental thing. And it was primarily carried out by Ernie O'Malley, John Prout, and Ono Duffy was there from headquarters overviewing. But Ernie O'Malley was the divisional commander. Trout was back from the Seventh American Army, became more prominent later, really. And the remarkable thing here, if you look at the age of Ernie O'Malley, 24 at that stage. He was 24 years of age, looking after the whole 2nd Southern Division. Remarkable, really. Who was arrested in Skeheenarinky at the time? So we're at the end. In jail, Dennis McGrath, Brackbawn, Timothy Mulcahy, the Caves, Maurice Regan, and James Regan from Dyrene. And as we mentioned previously, Frank Pine and Thomas Fitzgerald. Dennis McGrath was above in Ballykenner in County Down and spent he was there over a year, actually. And here he is doing some artwork with his name in it. And again, this is, I suppose, locked. They kept themselves busy by pretending they were in Lockderg and doing a whole pilgrimage up in the prison camp in August 1921. His name is on it again. And with some other locals there, Eamon Hannon from Linnacun out here, Dennis McGrath is there as well, John Creed from Bournecourt, and they're the locals that we all know. And again, this is Maureen Creed has this book above, actually, in the prison. They wrote which is quite common. And here we have John Creed writing in his autograph book, and the hut 606, 18 Ballykenler. But again, it was a tough time up there, don't get me wrong. Dennis McGrath back born again. He's home on parole, and a list of the people. So this is a year later, November. Morris and James were arrested again in May 1921. And he said inside they were blind probably to Clonmel, I think, and they were out about 10 times to be shot. Not for as long a period, but again, it was tough going. Tim Mulcahy, the Caves, he was taken to Kilworth camp and detained for a few months awaiting trial. Johnny Carney knows that. But again, that was common. They weren't tried, actually. It just kept totally illegal, really. This is the Kilworth camp, actually, what it looked like at the time, timber huts. And here you get a good picture with lads lined up, all timber huts. That's what Kilworth camp looked like at that time, 1921. The military handover. So in November 1921, Ballypreen, this barracks gets handed over. It's closed, I should say, then handed over that month again to the IRA. They take over Cahir in January and Cahir in January. And here, so when that happened, all these volunteers went into the barracks, not all the flying column, mainly the officers. They took over the barracks and became full military there in some respects. Who was in charge in Tipperary or in Skeheenarinky company and the company itself? So from 1917, as I was saying earlier, Morgan Lyons went all together and Dennis McGrath to some degree. 1918, I should say, 1919, this is when it became more militaristic. And they they separated. Johnny Carney took over. And Johnny was there all the way right through until 1922. He broke his leg, actually. And Michael McGrath did the first stint and Morris Fitzgerald. But John took back over again then. Thomas Kiley was first lieutenant. Second lieutenant is Morris Fitzgerald and Patrick Fox for a period. And quartermaster, Morris Regan. And again, Johnny Carney here in 1980 was lieutenant signals, but then he's promoted, as it happens. So and Johnny knows that in his thing. He said we didn't need all the officers. We had, they were more about getting the thing done than officers, I suppose. Elsewhere, Tom Fogarty he was first lieutenant in Mitchelstown, and Bill Mulcahy was officer commanding in Ballypreen Company here for a period. In the 6th Battalion, Morris then in 1919, 1920 was the adjutant. Dean Lunding was lieutenant of signals. Johnny Carney becomes lieutenant of first aid. The sniper Lunding again drill instructor, and Thomas Kiley. So Morris, I suppose, Morris is down here. He achieves the highest rank. Assistant. He was adjutant in flying column, but in the 2nd Southern by the end, he was the assistant adjutant. That's quite a high. That's the whole area, all that area. Johnny Carney. Johnny, just a bit of a focus on Johnny. I suppose because he was quite central to the whole thing, as you can see. Born 1898, he married Hannah Casey from Carrigain in Skeheenarinky, and the children were Shawnee Carney. Sean wrote quite a bit about it. Kathleen Renacht, Eileen O'Brien, and Anne Gardner, who I have here tonight as well. And Anne has wrote as well, and Kathleen as well have done various articles. And in some of Anne's books, again, they're a great read about that time. Tough time, but is well documented there. He lived at Coolgarden. He was a farmer all his life and a county councillor of note, and again died in 1964, aged 69. There's actually, thanks to Bobby and I got a recording of Johnny, which singing a song way back then, and Bobby has managed to extract it. So we'll just give that a quick listen here, so you can read through these are notations from about Johnny from different officers, very similar to what I had up in the front. Hopefully our technical glitches are behind us.
We've won the fight, the Saxons said, for air and soul at last is dead. The Gael content a slave to be, no longer dreams of liberty. But Eastern weak has shamed the lie, and shows that nations cannot die. The race from which such rebels came, no tyrant's power can ever tame. 'Tis true, alas, we were betrayed, and while the patriots' part they played, their country's honours traitor sold, for England's smile and England's gold. But now the nation starts to life, to awake again the ancient strife. No shall truce's treaty be with England till our land is free. All honour to the men that kept the watchfires bright while others slept, and sounding loud the morning call, did many a danger there forestall. For it is true that freedom's price should be for them life's sacrifice. Heroes their blood gladly gave, their country's life and soul to save. Say not that blood was shed in vain, it fell like fertilizing rain, and even now its fruit appears in Ireland's hope and England's fears. For now 'tis known the Gael retains the will and power to burst her chains. Oh, long shall Britain's warriors speak with trembling voice of Easter week. Oh, long shall Britain's warriors speak with trembling voice of Easter week.
So that's Johnny there, and thanks to Anne and Bobby for giving us the use of that, which is a great keepsake, actually. Likewise, Johnny was obviously in charge of the volunteers, but in the Cumman, these are the officers. Ella Fox was captain, Mary Fox was secretary, and Ellen Kiley was treasurer. And Annie Walsh or Annie O'Gorman was at a rank as well. And actually, that letter that Mary wrote out there with Ellen Kiley, it was Annie O'Gorman was with her when they took the ammunition and the jelly night, really. And that was the jelly night to blow up Brackmorn Bridge. And you can imagine if they were caught, there's no question, court-martial, it's death, as simple as that. So again, it was Annie was with Ellie, and that she mentions in her statement as well. Likewise, Ella Fox. Ella was born in 1894, Cahir. She'd actually immigrated to Boston, but she'd actually been there a few times in 1909, 1923 and 1929. She left from Cove. She married Martin Condon in Brookfield in Massachusetts. They had one child, Martin again. Lived in Whittam, just outside Massachusetts. And she was basically a farmer's daughter, housekeeper in Boston, which is the most common at the time. Unfortunately, she died in a car accident, actually, quite young, at 38 years of age. So we don't, while we have Johnny Carney has vouched for everyone, and there's numerous, in all the pensions, Johnny's and his fingerprints all over him, and recommending everyone, irrespective of politics, religion, or what they did or did not do, he's there. But Ella, unfortunately, would have been serving that as well, and that more or less passed on to Johnny as well to do that for the coming on as well. But she was, that's the Foxes up the top there. And I see quite a few of them here tonight. But she was very capable and able, and she was very well noted. Again, this is actually, you probably just see Countess Markovich here, but this is the convention in the Truce as well, 1921, and Ella Fox is here coming up from Skeheenarinky. And actually, there's just on his Donovan, actually, and bring my own grand-aunt from the shop up here. She was the company here. So they went up and represented this area, and Ella's in this crowd, and they're somewhere going to Dublin. The Sinn Féin officers, as we said, a little bit older, Thomas McGrath, Peter Thomas Jackson, Patrick Brady or Brady, really, Dennis McGrath and Thomas Fox. And they seem to be quite consistent. As I said, they're a bit older, they were probably in their 30s. The safe houses, I think every house is a safe house. This is just the headquarters, really, in Skeheen and Coolagharn Row, as far as I can see. Who passed through them at different stages? Eamon de Valera, Ernie O'Malley, certainly a lot of times, Todd Andrews, latterly, would have come through. Denny Lacey, Sean Tracy said more before, spent a lot of time, Dan Breen. So it's the who's who of the Republican movement, really. Tom Barry. Again, because the Galties is the route for Dublin. David Kent of Bernard, the Castle Lions, and Liam Lynch again would have been a regular. In fact, Liam Lynch actually, I suppose, gives out as a mild word when the first Sutton was to Seamus Robinson about the Irish horse coming out. He anticipated that from Cahir. He said, what the hell are you at up there? Why aren't you blocking? And that's when you see all the activity blocking the roads, because he was saying they were able to come out from Cahir all the way to Mitchelstown. Again, from Kerry Austin Stack, and ironically enough, Desmond Fischel would have passed through the area as well. And little did he know that he was at relations. These are some typical, I suppose, time. This the first top one is a double-barrel shotgun of the time that they would have had. Patsy King and Skeheenarinky has it, and the Webley revolver here. This is actually in display out there. It's Eamon McGrath brought down from Coolantala, thanks to Eamon, which is hidden behind a cupboard. You'll see it's quite pitted. This is what it looks like in real life. We have a good one here from, there's Moss Reid has kind of lent us 4 revolvers out there. But again, there's quite a few of these around the place. A lot of them are probably gone from different things. This is not to do with the time, but thanks to Noel Crotty and Morris in Dublin, this actually came from the area. This was way back when, 1800s, to make the lead balls. Again, it's just, I suppose it's only to show that they weren't just in the War of Independence, they were at it the whole time here, going back. The dugouts, so far, Bundalaria Wood, up the caves, where they hid arms, I suppose, really, and the Ray up past Carney's Field, up past Fox's there. And again, Curtin's outhouse, James was telling me that they had a stone inside the shed. He took away the stone, they hid arms in behind it, in the big wide walls. Up to Fischel's ditch again, that was common enough to hide arms in the ditches up as you go into the house, hit stones there. And Kiley's obviously clearly did the large arm stones when they got that raided. What was common quite out this area is as I know myself, we've all done it, pick stones and throw them in the corner. They hit them in those stones because every field had that. But they remarkably, and this is thanks to Philip O'Gorman put me onto this actually, the Skeheenarinky dugout. And I suppose for the lads here out in the start in Ireland and Ballybreen, we've been looking for dugouts, spent many Saturdays and Sunday. And in fairness to the IRA, they made them so you wouldn't find them, and they did a bloody good job because we couldn't find. We knew where they were. We knew they were in these areas. We couldn't find them. Philip a couple of years ago gave me the how many metres this is from here. He was going off doing a walk. I went up on a Sunday and I still couldn't find it. Spent the whole Sunday up there. But this view here is from I suppose Leonard's or Highlands on the Black Road looking down. And this field here, that's the dugout there. I think the Goms have this at the moment. But the wood so it's in the wood. At the time, I don't think that band of briars was there. But in plan, what it looks like is, you'll see it probably, maybe the section's probably best to go to first actually, because there's a better view. This is quite a steep rock stream there, heading into the Sheep River. It's 6 metres, 20 feet. This is deep. Not always watered, so certainly watered now. But so they went up here and ingeniously they cut into the bank. This is totally man-made, it wasn't a natural thing. They cut in here for about 8.5 metres or 28 feet, and it's 2 metres, obviously well taller than me, 6.5 foot. And then they put spars here, the brown you can see along, galvanised sheeting and covered it across. It's a mighty impressive structure actually. In plan then, it looks like this. It's a triangle shape. So they went in here, and as I said, Philip told me what it was, and I still couldn't find it. Now, there's 100-year growth there, there are dendrums there and things, but clearly the shape is still there, and it's well worth noting and preserving. And that would have been done in the latter part of it, actually, the last couple of months before the truce. Johnny Carney certainly notes it, the Foxes noted, they're all involved, the Walshes up all around there noted. It would have been used, I think, fairly extensively after. But again, it's something we was probably document a bit more. It's remarkable. It's remarkable in that other dugouts we've seen are generally something that they use from nature. You know, there's a double ditch or there's something they dug down, but this is totally man-made, and you don't need much imagination when you're up there to find it. But it's brilliant. The volunteer stats again. This will be all online, but there's just about 100 active here in the different areas that come them on. 83 IRA and 17 coming them on. That's actually quite a high number. I know it's the same from the coming them on compared to other areas. This one always amazes me really. The average age 1914 when they start. The Irish Volunteers is 18, the women was not coming on as 19. At the height of it, 1921 is 25 and 26. So to get that average, you can imagine how young they are. There's the odd 30-year-old in there, but they were very young. And 30, I'd have been well retired by then, whatever. This is some of the volunteers here. This is what the lads, I suppose, Sean Hogan's calling what they'd look like with the attire, with the rifles and the whole lot. Again, this one we have Morris McGrath here. This is all the Cahir Batallion after it. Kit Conway here and Johnny Carney here as well, and all the other ones from the Cahir officers. So the flying column, these are the ones related to Skeheenarinky at the back here, and Ed Mulcahy, David Fitzgerald here, Gabriel McGrath at the front, Morris McGrath here, and Bill Mulcahy. Now there's a lot of them from the Batallion area in here as well, like Tom Gorman here and a few more of them. So they had quite in this famous photo, there's fair as much Skeheenarinky, well, more Skeheenarinky than anyone else actually, strangely enough. This is another famous one, the Sniper Lundigan here, Jackie Tobin, we believe this is Morris McGrath as well, taking up around Buncourt, I reckon. And again, that's the flying column, Frank Pine, and people mentioned Bill Keaton, Thomas O'Gorman, and Jack Butler, Dave Moore, and the rest kind of more like the Clonmel area. That's the first segment of this. I'll quickly go on and just get some music on there with Morris, just play some tunes over the pitches. So the next part won't take too long. It's the people, I'll just knock this off. It's the people that are involved, the 100 people I was talking about there. So Morris, if you want to just get set up there, you'll have a few minutes for a break if you want to actually, but the next part will be all the volunteers that took part in the men and women. And as they're setting up, I'll just talk. So I've called down to quite a few of you. I suppose I probably should have introduced myself at the first beginning, Neil Donovan anyway, but a lot of you, it's a bit late now, but a lot of you, I suppose, I'm probably Eamon's out there somewhere, Eamon Donovan's brother, Tomas's brother. One time I did said Con Donovan's son, but now it's the twins' brother. And a lot of you wouldn't know him because I was working away, but the people, they've been great in fairness to give me the photos. There's more photos out there, definitely. There's 100, I said there's 100 names. We've more or less, it's nearly killed me, but I've sorted the McGraths, the Foxes, the O'Briens, more or less. Not quite there yet. To show, as my father used to say, for God's sake, don't you know that's Edmund Foxes, and you know, and you're looking at the picture when they were 20, like, and I'm there. But so we eventually got there. We got through them. I'll just knock this off for a second, so and switch on the other one. So Morris is just going to accompany this here, and there's no talking on this, it's just you just watch it right through, and I'll leave it go after anyway. So that's more or less, after this is more or less the presentation. We'll just have a few songs from Morris. I see Charlie there and John Joe as well. We'll just have a few songs. But before that, then I'll probably just do the thanks and let you play away the music. Yeah, so this one we'll just walk through this.
First of all, listen, Neil, can I say that you've done an absolutely fantastic job, and we all feel very proud. We all feel very proud of our ancestors, my granduncles and everybody, you know. And when we were young, I was just thinking there that I always thought myself, you know, like this. It was years and years ago since the country was under British rule, but I knew Anna's father, Johnny Carney. I knew all those people, but I never knew at that particular time that he had played such a prominent role in the fight for Irish freedom. The same as everybody else, you know. I knew so many people, you know, that at that particular time I never realised like this, you know. But you've done fantastic research and you've narrated it so eloquently.
Yeah, no, I know it's probably gone on quite a lot longer than I anticipated, but just that point actually, which is a good point there, we concentrate on Sean Hogan's column here, but the reason Johnny Carney, I firmly believe when you read through it, that they kept him there was that Dean Lacey's column came through here as well, and he noticed that a couple of the times, you know, the Galties, the column, the East Limerick column, Donegal Hannigan came in here as well from Kilbenny, and even the North Cork from Mitchelstown came in here. So Galtee Mountains was a safe place, but it was a nightmare for the volunteers. You know, most areas have one column, but Sean Hogan's promptly. But then Lacey came down 3 or 4 or 5 times here, and they would have stayed as well, and they got the same, no different. So thanks, Morris, and I'll just let this off.
I should be wearing a balaclava for this particular song, I'd say.
Oh, I am a merry ploughboy,
and I ploughed the fields all day, till a sudden thought came to my mind that I should run away. Now I've always hated slavery since the day that I was born, and I'm off to join the IRA, and I'm off tomorrow morn. And we're all off to Dublin in the green, where the helmets glisten in the sun, where the bayonets flash and rifles crash to the echo of a Thompson gun. Now I'll take my short revolver and my bandolier of lead. Oh, live or die, I can but try to avenge my country's dead. And I leave aside my pick and spade, I leave aside my plough, and I leave aside my old grey mare, for no more I'll need her now. And I leave aside my Mary, she's the girl I do adore, and I wonder if she'll think of me when she hears the cannons roar. And when the war is over and dear old Ireland's free, I will take her to the church to wed, and a rebel's wife she'll be. And we're all off to Dublin in the green, where the helmets glisten in the sun, where the bayonets flash and the rifles crash to the echo of a Thompson gun. For some men fight for glory, and some men fight for gold, but the IRA we're fighting for the land that the Saxons stole. And we're all off to Dublin in the green, where the helmets glisten in the sun, where the bayonets flash and the rifles crash to the echo of a Thompson gun, to the echo of a Thompson gun. Oh, come tell me, Sean O'Farrell, tell me why you hurry so. Hush, my buckle, hush and listen, and your cheeks were all aglow. I've got orders from the captain, get you ready quick and soon, for the pikes must be together at the rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon. The pikes must be together at the rising of the moon. Oh, then tell me, Sean O'Farrell, where the gathering is to be. In the old spot by the river, right well known to you and me. One more single woeful token, whistle up a marching tune. Put your pike upon your shoulder at the rising of the moon. Out of many a mud wall cabin, eyes were watching through the night. Many a manly heart was beating for the blessed morning light. Murmurs rang along the valley like the banshee's lonesome crew, and 1,000 blades were flashing at the rising of the moon. The rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon. 1,000 blades were flashing at the rising of the moon. All along that singing river, that black mass of men was seen. All along that singing river, that black mass of men was seen. High above their shining weapons hung their own beloved green. Did to every foe and traitor whistle up a marching tune. Hooray, me boys, for freedom, it's the rising of the moon. It's the rising of the moon, it's the rising of the moon. Hooray, me boys, for freedom, it's the rising of the moon.
Thanks very much. So that's all the 100 people, men and women, that are the volunteers. And it'll keep playing there, which we'll probably listen to a few more tunes. I see Shawnee there, and maybe John Joe might make their way up here. But it's, I suppose, the silence tells its own story. It's fascinating, really, these people. You know, they're your people, they're Skeheenarinky people, really, every one of them. And as I said, I'd love to complete it. You can see a few gaps there. There's a few to be confirmed. I have most information, and I'll be hounding you is probably the word I suppose I'll use to close out this. And Seamus here is recording it, so this will be up on YouTube in about 2 weeks. But I'll get more photos. Eddie Maher and Petty McGrath gave me a few photos there again tonight, so I'll add to it. You know, I mean, the headstones are great like this, but a photo is even better. But again, I suppose to reiterate, I think from listening to Mary and Johnny earlier, what they went through. And I mean, these are your own people. But as I always say, in 100 years' time, I think they'll still, Dan Breen, Sean Tracy, Michael Collins, David Eyre, will still be celebrated and talked about. But to me, it's important that these people, while we can document it now, do this and put it up online for everyone to see and update it accordingly. I'll get the lads to sing a few songs, but I'd just like to probably do a few thank yous. From the last time I saw you, I need glasses now. I suppose on stage tonight, first of all, I'd like to thank Anne for doing the intro, Mary Mulhern and John Butler for doing the letters, the musicians, Morris Crotty, Shawnee Crotty will be up there, and John Joseph Donovan again. And again, all of them have connections. They've all people, everyone that you see here is related in here, and as most of the hall is. And in Bobby for the Johnny Carney song, again, that was a great addition. I suppose the biggest complaint I get nearly every time I do this is that we don't charge, and people try to give money after. And as I've said before, I'll say it again, the reason I don't charge is that you've given me the information. You know, the people here in this room, it's like me charging to see your own information. All I'm doing is patching it all together. And it's, trust me, I love doing it. But so we've come to a compromise tonight. The Skeheenarinky School Parents Council Association, Parents Association, I should say, they have teas and coffees after. So there's a bucket out the front there, just a donation. They're serving the tea and coffee, and thanks to Catherine Welsh for organising that. So contribute to them, that'll go to Skeheenarinky School. And that keeps me happy and everyone happy, I think. The food, I'd like to thank Dave Fischel, the butcher, Pat Russell again, Eamon Donovan primarily again, and obviously the people that donated there. The sound recordings, Sham has disappeared there, but I suppose when I do these things, I nearly see if Sham is available, because it makes life so much easier. The sound, everything, it's brilliant, and it's just boxed off, and we're lucky to have him here, and in South Tipperary, I think we're lucky to have him, and North Cork. Trust me, it's a brilliant job, as always. And I said he'll edit it and put it up on YouTube. So I'd like to thank the Batallion Community Council, James Hackett again, that keep trying to pay money for the hall, but they won't take it. And again, Mike Geary for setting it up, Richard and me, and Billy Hale as well, helping with the cabinets there yesterday. It all helps. The revolvers out the back, Moss Reedy was a great help. The Moss's ones, the ones, and Eamon McGrath's one as well there. And the photos, I suppose we're blessed in some respects that there was a John Derby and a Bridget Gleeson, really, that they took these photos. And again, I'd like to thank Cahir and John and Cashel for letting us use these photos. I suppose finally, I'd like to thank you, really. And as my father said, don't ever. This is the most dangerous part of it, he says. He always warned, but don't do it. But anyway, we always do. We still. But basically, I'm thanking the people of Skeheenarinky, all of you, and Burncoat and Rossoney, Gilbany and Ballybreen again, but the people of Skeheenarinky. And in no order, I mean, if I thank individuals, I will maybe a few in the end, but really, I'm thanking all the Foxes, the Carneys, the O'Briens, the Englishes, McGraths, Slatterys, Morris, Hickey, Kings, Crotties, Curtin, Butlers, the Welches, the Falco, O'Riordan, Highland, Gormans, the O'Gormans, the Mahers, the Kileys, the Fitzgibbons. So the fact that's everyone in Skeheen, really, to be honest with you. But it feels like that. I'm sure if I left out someone, I apologise. But and again, I will keep at this. We'll get all those pictures. But there's a few that I have to thank, and I hate individual people because there's so many really. But I looked at, I have the book there when I wrote down. It was actually 3 years ago, more or less the date. I was up at Foxes there, just a week ago or something, I was up there 3 years ago. And feed me with apple tart. I haven't lost that part of it yet, but and COVID put paid to all that. This would have been probably this time a couple of years ago. But I have to thank Philip O'Gorman, John English, the Caves, and Johnny Butler, because they've been a constant really throughout this. I think every time I go to them, and I went to them today as well, to be honest with you, they're as much energy as you can think. So again, thanks to everyone here, and the people. Sorry, I suppose I'll finish up. It gives me great light to this because I can see when the Townlands is playing there, your faces. That makes it for me as simple as that. Because I was the same when I was watching my grandparents up here. So, as I said, please, I won't do questions and answers because there'll be a few songs now and you get tea and coffee there. And that I've gone 2 hours anyway. But please feel free to give me a shout after any questions. Out the front, you see the pensions and all that stuff. That's just the cover sheets. Eamon and my brother, I filled 3 bedrooms up there with stuff, so I have copies. It's all online actually. I can let you know if any of your people are up here. Give me a shout after or email, or if any nugget information, I'll take your details down and call to you after certainly. So again, thanks very much, and I think we'll finish up with a few songs. But feel free to go and have tea and coffee through these doors here, and I'll catch up with you. I'll leave this playing anyway.
Don't expect now that I'm going to be as good as my first cousin. This is the song what it's all about. I joined the flying column in 1916 in Cork with John Moylan, Tipperary with Dan Breen. Arrested by Free Staters and sentenced for to die. Farewell to Tipperary, says the Galtee mountain boy. We went across pleasant valleys and over hilltops green, where we met with Dinny Lacey, Sean Hogan and Dan Breen, Sean Moylan and his gallant men, they kept the flag flying high. Farewell to Tipperary, says the Galtee mountain boy. We crossed the Dublin mountains, we were rebels on the run. The hunted night and morning, we were outlaws but free men. We trekked the Wicklow mountains as the sun was shining high. Farewell to Tipperary,
says the Galtee mountain boy. I'm bidding farewell to old Clonmel, I never more will see. And to the Galtee mountains that oft time sheltered me, to the men who fought for their liberty and died without a sigh, may their cause be ne'er forgotten, says the Galtee mountain boy. May their cause be ne'er forgotten, says the Galtee mountain boy.
Thanks, Shawnee. Oh, yeah.
One, two.
Sorry, just like to thank Shawnee there and Morris. John Joes again. John is related to all the Kileys, I suppose, the Highlands, and like most people here, all have Skeheenarinky, I suppose, when you do that. But again, I'd like to thank John and all the lads. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, as Neil saying, was our grandmother was Ellen Kiley, and to be honest, there wasn't much talk about it when we were growing up. We kind of skipped a generation, I suppose, in so many ways. I suppose we were all too young really to understand it. But I think Neil has done an incredible job. Both I think he did a night in Skeheen, or he did a night in Ireland a couple of years back as well. And in so many ways, only for the likes of Neil, like it would have probably skipped a generation. All the information that he's gathered is just phenomenal. So fair play again, Neil. When apples still grow in November, when blossoms all bloom on each tree, and when leaves are still green in December, it's then that our land will be free. I wandered her hills and her valley, and still through my sorrow I see a land that has never known freedom, and still only our rivers run free. I drink to the death of her manhood, to the men who'd have rather they died than to live in the cold chains of bondage, to bring back the rights were denied. Oh, where are you now when I need you? What burns where the flames used to be? Are you gone like the snows of last winter? and still only our rivers run free. What good is in youth when it's aging? What joy are in eyes that can't see? When there's sorrow and sunshine and flowers, and still only our rivers run free, and still only our rivers run free. In my memory, I will always see the town that I have loved so well, where our school played ball by the gas yard wall, and we laughed through the smoke and the smell. Going home in the rain, running up the dark lane, past the jail and down behind the fountain. Those were happy days in so many, many ways, in the town I love so well. In the early morn, in the shirt factory hall, called women from Cregan, the moor and the ball, while the men on the dole played the mother's role, fed the children and then walked the dog. And when times got tough, there was just about enough, but they saw it through without complaining, for her deep inside was a burning pride for the town I love so well. There was music there in the dairy air, like a language that we could all understand. I remember the day when I earned my first pay, and I played in a small pickup band. There I spent my youth, and to tell you the truth, I was sad to leave it all behind me, for I learned about life and I found me a wife in the town I love so well. But when I returned, all my eyes they were burned to see how a town could be brought to its knees by the armored cars and the bombed out bars and the gas that hangs on to every breeze. Now the army's installed by that old gas yard wall, and the damn bad wire gets higher and higher, with their tanks friends and their guns. Oh my God, what have they done to the town that I love so well? Now the music's gone, but they still carry on, for their spirit's been bruised, never broken. They will not forget that their hearts are all set, and tomorrow and peace once again. For what's done, it is done, and what's won, it is won, and what's lost is lost and gone forever. I can only pray for a bright brand new day in the town I love